Hello everyone and welcome to ETC3 TV. I'm Christy Lindstrom. We are also live on the Fannin County Family Connection Facebook page. Today's program is a special program, Your Mental Health Matters. It's okay to not be okay. Today's program is the final program in a series of shows that we've been bringing you for the last 5 months. They are an initiative of Fannin County Family Connection and many supporting organizations. And those organizations include the Blue Ridge Community Theater, Fannin County Division of Family and Children's Services, Fannin County Public Library, Highland Rivers Health, the North Georgia Autism Foundation, the North Georgia Mountain Crisis Network, and the Craddock Center. And we are so grateful for all of these organizations partnering together to bring you this mental health initiative that we've been doing so for the last 5 months. You can find out more about this campaign on the Fannin County Family Connection website at fcfc1.org. And we are excited to let you know that this is the last television show, but the initiative doesn't stop here. Starting in the new year throughout 2022, we are partnering with the News Observer in Fannin County. So every single month, we'll be bringing you a mental health awareness initiative report. We'll be bringing you a story. So many of the organizations that you have heard from throughout this initiative, they'll be writing stories and bringing those to you through the paper. And those will be published the last week of each month there at the News Observer. And we would like to thank the News Observer for giving us this space so that we can continue to bring you this initiative in print. Today, our discussion is about autism. And our special guest today, Mr. Tripp Ritchie, he is the director, the executive director of the North Georgia Autism Foundation. Also, we have Dr. Brian Johnson with us today with Blue Ridge Psychological Services. Thank you for being here today. And also we have Carrie Edge. Carrie is going to share her personal autism story with a child in her family, but also Carrie came today because she is the executive director of Elevation House in Rome, Georgia. So thank you, Carrie, for the long drive that you made today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Christy.
And so we'll talk about a little later in the show the services that the Elevation House provides as it relates to mental health in general. But we want to start our discussion about autism today. Doctor, tell us what is autism in general before we continue our conversation.
Right, so autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by deficits in social communication. And that can look like a variety of things depending on age, depending on developmental level, and depending on functioning level, and as well as repetitive behaviors or restricted interests. And these can range from the common hand flapping that kind of has been characterized of autism since its early inception to being really interested in one singular subject such as dinosaurs or trains or stuff like that. And more recently, autism has been split into spectrum, so it covers 3 different levels. So with level 1, we have covering what was previously diagnosed as Asperger's. So these are kids with average to above average cognitive abilities, well-developed language, they just may not use it appropriately for social communication all the time. Level 2 are children who, and I say children, but as we'll discuss, autism doesn't stop when you turn 18, it keeps going. So just know that when I say children, that's just because that's who I see all the time.
So people in general.
People in general, exactly. So people on level 2 tend to have that verbal language typically, but they may not effectively use it for social communication or to get their wants and needs met consistently. So they may do it sometimes or inconsistently for some things. And then level 3 is what people have historically called autism. So these are children who may have limited verbal repertoires. They may use only a few words or no words at all, and they may engage in severe self-injury or aggressive behaviors, likely due to that lack of communication skill.
And Dr. Rocky was here before, a doctor there in your practice, and he mentioned something that was kind of like a light bulb for me and for members of our group, and that was that if autism is treated or diagnosed at an early age, then there is the possibility that later in life, depending on the severity with the person, that there may not be any visible or noticeable signs of autism as a child gets older if there's early intervention, right?
That's correct. So actually what we're learning is that by age 5, the best indicator of prognosis is actually the development of verbal and vocal language by age 5. If we can develop that early enough and get kids able to communicate their wants and needs and communicate socially, we can typically have them integrated into typically developing classrooms and in with typically developing peers to the point where they learn very similarly to their peers.
And I was looking online, trying to just learn more myself. I try to learn about these topics, and I come nowhere close to the knowledge and education that sits on the sofa today. I'm merely a mouthpiece to help them to deliver their stories. But I was looking on the CDC's website about children and milestones, and you can share later, Carrie, about your personal story that you realized that your son was not meeting certain milestones. So tell me about milestones and what parents should be looking for, and then we'll talk about some resources for tracking milestones.
Absolutely. So milestones in general are things we're looking at that should be achieved by certain ages. And we want to be really careful because there is a wide range of what's normal and then what kind of starts to fall in the atypical range. But typically we want to see things like at a certain point we want to see kids making eye contact with significant caregivers and looking towards individuals and orienting toward loud noises. These are all things that we look for, and if we're failing those, then we may need to seek some outside help, some outside consultation. Other things to look for, the development of language. We want to see a lot of babbling early on in development, and then that turning into words, and then those words turning into multiple word phrases and sentences. And again, this is dependent on age, and there's a lot of different milestones that we have to talk about. But as kids grow older, professionals in their lives will start to notice these differences, and that's really where we want these families to get caught, is with these professionals noticing and catching with those milestones.
And as I mentioned, the CDC has some information, a really nice collection of handouts that you can look at, and it's www.cdc.gov/actearly. Those are milestones. And I'm not sure if we're ready in the booth, but there's a short video that I can show. And let's take a look at that quick video, and it'll tell you more about the app for milestones that you can track on your phone to see where your child's milestones are. And also you can get a copy of this handout. So if we can take a look at that quick video.
Clara is our first child, and we didn't know what to expect being first-time parents. And it's just been such a fun experience to watch her grow. Starting out very early, we monitored Clara's development using the Learn the Signs Act Early checklist. It was just an amazing resource to be able to say, okay, you know, this is what she should be doing at this age, and it calmed our fears a little bit.
I would have to say my favorite resource of the Learn the Signs Act Early would be the app, but having the app readily available has honestly been great, and it's been awesome just seeing her development and growth. The Learn the Signs Act Early app is actually very easy to use. I can access it right there on my phone, and whenever my mind kind of pops to it, I can open it up.
I think I am a Learn the Signs Act Early super user. The Learn the Signs Act Early materials have been invaluable to me because I feel like they've been there with me throughout parenthood in kind of the way that a wise old friend might be.
Using Learn the Signs Act Early has helped me monitor my daughter's development and gives me a great peace of mind that the information is accurate and it's backed by science. It's fun to see when she achieves a milestone. I feel very proud for her and excited.
And it's not just a milestone of, is my child doing this next thing? It's what should I be working with my child next? Because that can be a big question mark as a first-time parent.
You know, I want to know if maybe she's lagging farther behind than she really should, and it's something to bring up with our pediatrician.
having something at my fingertips to kind of go through it with her physician. She's hitting these milestones, but not these other milestones. Should I be concerned? What kinds of things can I do to bring her up to speed? And then taking that and translating it with her teachers in her classroom to make sure these are the things I would like to focus on, and how can we work together to make sure that she's developing appropriately.
The Learn the Signs Act Early resources empower parents to take a stake in tracking their child's developmental milestones.
And we apologize to those watching on Facebook. You didn't have the opportunity to see that video. However, I will link to that video once we conclude this Facebook Live, and that way you'll be able to check that out for yourself. But as the video mentioned, you can find it yourself at cdc.gov/act early, and that will give you some milestone information. You can pull those handouts out, and that can really help a parent, right, to understand what milestones their child should be meeting.
Absolutely. And again, we don't want to scare you with some of this, because some things are normal to be a little bit behind, and there's nothing wrong with seeking out help or consultation, even if it is just a little bit. That's what those professionals are there for. And the worst case scenario, you get a little bit of help that maybe wasn't 100% necessary, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty okay outcome.
And why is your practice of looking at autism and children with these issues, why is that important to you? Because we didn't talk about your education, but your education and experience have brought you to this point of serving children.
Right. So for me personally, for a long time, I knew that I wanted to understand people. I found people fascinating from an outside and an inside perspective. I was just always a curious person. So I went and got a bachelor's in psychology. And while trying to decide if I wanted to do research or work clinically, I got a job doing in-home applied behavior analysis with children with autism or with developmental disabilities. And not only did I get paid to play Play-Doh and play with Legos, I got to be present during some major milestones for some people's lives. I got to see kids speak their first words and their first sentences. And that sticks with you. That's something that I felt like I could do that, and I've continued seeking that out since. And you have a partnership with North Georgia Psychological Services, or Blue Ridge Psychological Services, and the North Georgia Autism Foundation. Your organizations have been working together since about 2015, right, Tripp?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Kyle Rocky for never giving up and seeking the best possible resource for children with autism in Blue Ridge and northern rural Georgia. It's admirable what he did, and to find somebody as qualified and as unique in their ability to provide services as Dr. Brian Johnson is a blessing. I mean, it's an answer to our prayers. He's incredibly qualified. He's gifted with the children, and also, importantly, he's gifted with the families. And when you're supporting a child with autism, it's important to include and treat the entire family, because that's the environment the child spends a lot of their time with, and he has that gift that not every clinician has. And so we're just thankful that he's here, and he's doing great work. He does have he's doing such great work. He has a wait list now to July, and so
July of 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
So we could use 2 or 3 more Dr. Johnsons in this area and still not have enough services for the children that we're trying to support. But hats off to Dr. Rocky. He did an amazing job, and hats off to Dr. Johnson. Kind of going back to the milestones, if I could, just a little bit. I've worked in a couple of hospital settings in developmental medicine, and there is a systematic approach to assessing these milestones. And there's a screener called the MCHAT-R that can be used by the clinician and should be used starting at the 12-month baby check, 18-month, 24-month, 36-month. to see, one, if there is developmental delay, to make sure that the child is progressing on schedule, because they can start out having fewer features of delay or developmental deficits, and those will increase because they are not maintaining their progression towards the appropriate developmental stages. The challenge that we have is that the pediatricians have kind of a cultural approach to development, as all children develop at a different rate with different features, and they don't want to label a child. So by using an evidence-based repeatable screener like the MCHAT-R, they can make the referrals, as Dr. Johnson said, to speech, to OT, to any of the other developmental areas that are showing up, and begin treating that child with intense therapy at an early age. And going to the speech and communication, behavior is important too, because if a child can't sit for these modalities like speech and OT, they are not going to get the full benefit, and it's going to increase anxiety for the child, for the clinician, and for the family. So you need a balanced approach, and having Dr. Johnson as a board-certified behavior analyst, he provides a unique a functional behavioral approach to his diagnosis and to his treatment of these families. So I think we have a good start. It's just that we need to go literally one pediatrician at a time and explain to them the importance of using a screener and that early intervention diagnosis, and what a difference that makes on the trajectory of the child's life and the families, because it reduces anxiety in the family. And there's a really high divorce rate among parents with autism, with children with autism. It's disproportional to other disabilities. And I think it starts in the beginning, because the family is anticipating having a child and doing the typical child activities through that child's early life. And it doesn't happen that way. So mental health is a really big feature in supporting and wraparound services of getting the child started correctly in their development.
And share about the North Georgia Autism Foundation. You've been on my personal program before, and we would like to share that today about what services that you provide, because the reason that this whole initiative came to be is because there was an event called a civic dinner, where people from the community in Fannin sat together at tables, they broke bread, and said, what are the holes, what are services, what are things that are happening in our community, or what are we not doing, or what holes are there, how can we fill them? And so mental health services became the topic. And of course today is part of that. And did you find that there was a hole in our community with autism services? Is that how North Georgia Autism Foundation came to be? What's your history?
So
and you can take it back
long.
to your professional history too, because you have a long a list of things that brought you back to your hometown.
Yes. So the reality is that there are really two Georgias. And there's Metro Atlanta, where children are diagnosed at an earlier age. There are services that are provided. The education system supports them. There are many programs, only that's an hour and a half away from us. Okay. So our community doesn't have these services. Dr. Johnson is remarkable up here. He's like a mini Marcus Autism Center in one person. It is a good way to think of it.
But the wait list is July to see him.
Yes, but we have some solutions. What we do, and being on your program before, I got a little too technical, okay? So to Dr. Johnson, the child is a client or a patient, okay? To the school system, the child is a student. Okay? To the physician, the child is a patient. To us, we're his advocate or her advocate. We are advocates for the child, the family. We interface with all the different agencies and clinicians to help the parent understand the science behind all the different challenges that child has, and how to receive those services. So we get the family unstuck, whether they just got a diagnosis, they've had one for a while, or they're an adult. And that's sort of our whole approach. I know that's really simple, but if you're stuck, call us and we'll get you unstuck.
And Carrie, I'd love to start and have you share your story, because the purpose of Carrie coming today was to talk about the mental health community services that she provides through Elevation House in Rome.
Yes.
And in our pre-show, as things always take a turn, and we go where the conversation goes. And you shared with us your personal story that you have a child that was diagnosed with autism, and your road to that diagnosis was a difficult road. So take us back, and thank you for being vulnerable to share your personal story, which was really not why you were sharing today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you first of all for having me on the show. And as we sit and I hear both of you talking on both different sides, but the same side of a different coin, or the same coin, it brings back a lot of memories. And honestly, a lot of them are very emotive when you talk about the divorce rate being higher. And there needing to be advocates and support systems, even outside of medical mental health care. That's very critical. And that's one of the things that Elevation House does for adults living with serious mental illness.
Can you brush your hair back just a little bit off your microphone? Thank you so much.
So my son is 20 years old, and our journey began at 17 weeks gestation. So that's before he was born. And there was a notice in our ultrasound, the one everyone's always excited about. That's the one where you find out if you're having a boy or a girl. Well, we found out that we had abnormally large ventricles in the right and left hemisphere of the brain. And as just a lay person with some background in psychology and sociology, I had a bachelor's. Kind of knew, but didn't really know. And so it started a series of ultrasounds up until delivery. And when he was born, there were neonatal specialists in the room, and everything checked out good. Everything seemed to be fine. His APGAR scores were a little lower, but we kind of thought, okay, everything's good. We were referred to a neurologist up until his 6th month. He had some scans that were done. We had to wait a little while. They wanted him to be done really early, but him being put to sleep as an infant was very dangerous, and we opted as parents not to do that. We took a calculated and educated risk to not do that. And at 6 months, he was reaching, or appeared to be reaching, developmental milestones. And we were released from care, and then shortly thereafter we moved from Louisville, Kentucky to Rome, Georgia. And we started to notice that we had an older son who's 4 years older, and we started to notice that our younger son wasn't quite reaching some of the milestones like we thought that he should be, namely with mobility and speech. He made fairly decent eye contact, and I think somewhat as a mom, I ignored it because I had what appeared to be a normal baby after a very traumatic 40 weeks of pregnancy. When someone tells you something's not quite right with something you're carrying, it's an experience that I can't even share with you how emotional that can be and overwhelming. And so my son was 3 years old before a pediatrician who was new to the Rome, Georgia area had the courage, that's what I told him, had the courage to say, I think something's not quite right. We had tubes put in his ears. They said that would fix the speech. They explained away some of the mobility issues because he was mobile. So instead of crawling, he would roll. So we called him Rolly. So he would army crawl or roll everywhere. He still got to everything he wanted or needed, but it was just different. He didn't walk quite at a year old or 18 months. In fact, he walked at 19 months and then stopped walking until about 24 months. So there were a lot of his development was odd, and it's still very odd. A lot of abnormalities. One time he's exhibiting, he can do things, and then other times he can't do the same thing. Just a lot of inconsistencies and abnormalities. So After we were told by a pediatrician that we should pursue additional avenues, she sent us to a psychologist who gave our son his first diagnosis was oppositional defiance disorder and ADHD. And then from there, we got in a car and we drove anywhere they told us to go. And fortunately for my family, we had the resources, but I think about many families who maybe don't have the resources or don't have the educational background that I might have had to understand the enormity and complexity of what we were experiencing as a family. We were able to enroll in the Babies Can't Wait program that's here in Georgia. He had about 8 to 6 months in that program. We were able to get him into special education services, but it was a very difficult road. He was level 1 when he was initially diagnosed. He harmed himself. He would literally, if he was upset, he'd fall straight back. Normal people don't fall straight back and not try to catch themselves. He would fall straight back, not catch himself. He was fixated on playing the drums, which he still is very musically oriented, in sports. And he would use drumsticks to hit his brother, which was really hard as a mom, feeling like you have to protect your child from another one of your children, and where is this going to stop? He had escape behaviors. We have a lot of really horrific stories about escaping. I mean, we had to lock ourselves in our house. We called him Baby Deanie, like Houdini. He would use the drumsticks to manipulate any kind of lock. One morning at 1 a.m. in the morning, I had a really sick feeling in the pit of my gut. We had an infant daughter at the time. I had 5 children total. And I had a sick feeling in the pit of my gut, and I got up, and he was on the 2nd floor balcony climbing up to the top. And I immediately said, we have to move. He escaped into the neighborhood and was running around. Fortunately, we were kind of in a cul-de-sac. So he escaped from the pediatrician's office and ran into the parking lot. So when you see people who have their children in backpacks with little tails on them, don't laugh at them. The first altercation my son ever was in was at age 6 because someone laughed at his brother because he had a leash. So you don't know what you don't know, but that was our experience. Now my son is 20 years old. Thanks to advocacy from ourselves as parents hanging in there and fighting for him with IEPs, pushing back with the school systems, having educators that would listen to us, connecting with NAMI Rome. I encourage people to connect with advocacy organizations, find other families like you that can support you and help you along the journey. Everybody's journey is different, but it helps to know someone else is in the same journey. My son will graduate as a senior. He's a senior at Model High School this year, and he will graduate, and he is going to be an intern at Redmond Regional Medical Center through Floyd County School Systems Project Learn, where he will actually work at the hospital for a year before he will receive his certificate from the high school. 4 years ago, however, and this brings me into mental health, my son was diagnosed, in addition to his autism spectrum disorder, with bipolar and generalized anxiety disorder. And over the last year and a half, couple of years, we have been dealing with mania and generalized anxiety that has really been exacerbated by COVID. He's old enough to understand the risks associated with COVID and going to school and riding school buses and all of those sorts of things. And it is not easy. Every morning is difficult. He's not a little kid anymore. He's a grown-up in a grown-up world. And we don't curse in my family, but I'll just say my son is a grown-up. Mm-hmm. And I'm being very transparent. There's a lot of choice words used in the morning. He has senioritis now and does not want to get up and go to school. But, you know, for him, his schedule is really important. And my husband is an amazing person to be so patient with another man mm-hmm. that we literally provide all the care for, who literally is can be physical, but mostly verbal now. Thank goodness that there's been he's level 2 now, Dr. Johnson, because we've stayed in the fight, but it is not an easy fight. But I'm going to tell you, it's worth it.
my son is worth it, and your child is worth it.
And Tripp, is her story common for parents that are walking through the doors? As she mentioned, she has a background in education in psychology and the mental health field. And that really didn't, while it equipped you, it didn't equip you because you're a parent.
So
Is she common as the parents that walk through your doors?
probably the best advocate for a child is a well-informed parent. And that's because they're going to all the different environments that the child is experiencing every day, whether it's the school or to out in the public, to the clinics that they need to go to. And kind of if you think about North Georgia and the rural settings, there are no independent pediatric rehab facilities. There's no OT, no PT, no speech, pediatric. So the school system provides those services in the rural communities. Now their focus is IDEA, which is the federal law that governs what's required for an education. Okay, so their level of success is to provide equal access to an education, which is different than a medical assessment. Okay, so if you have a child that's getting speech or OT, in most school systems, they are not providing a medical treatment. They're providing enough so that that child can attend and participate in class. Those services generally are not of the frequency or intensity to change the child's brain. Okay, sometimes they're in groups, sometimes they're once a month. It just depends on what's agreed upon by the family. I have to say, in our area, we're very fortunate because Union County has Tiffany Seltzer, and she's the director of special ed. They go above and beyond to support these families because they get it. In Fannin County, we have Shannon Miller and Dr. Connie Huff. They go above and beyond. They treat every child as if it's their own child and ensure that these services are provided at a level normally above what an educational system will provide because there are no other services. That parent, and parents are highly variable. They have different abilities. Some don't understand, some understand. And it's not always the ones that you think. Let me just say that. But the school system here provides those pediatric rehab services, I think, well beyond what we could expect in other areas. And they do make a difference in that child's life. Because if they see the child not progressing in an area like speech, for example, they provide more intense services. And they have a phenomenal speech and language pathologist at their Head Start, Sarah Rice, who's as good as any that I've seen in any hospital I've worked. And she has a heart for this. And they have a school psychologist named Christine Hinman, and she gets autism. So to have those type of resources with Dr. Johnson, it makes the IEP process a little bit easier because they're on the same page with you. They're not throwing up obstacles to prevent the progress. So going back, just to review just a little bit, we're at the pediatrician, they do a screener, they see that the child's not progressing, they make a referral to Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson makes the diagnosis. They send the child to school. The child gets screened for special ed services. We still need to send that child down to Canton for additional outside services so that you take the school services and the outside services to ensure that the child has the best chance possible. You're optimizing that child's services, okay? Then you go into transition services. When the child's in 9th grade, they have to have by law, a transition IEP. The challenge that we have is that transition is to the end of the school program, in either with a diploma or a certificate or the child's 21st birthday. Okay, so that's not preparing that child necessarily for what happens after school. And you could probably talk to that because they have great services in Rome, what Carrie has explained so far, but that's not everywhere.
No, and regardless of the services you have, the system is difficult to navigate. We don't do a very good job of educating people how to navigate the system, and I experienced that with adults living with serious mental illness, who, by the way, most of the individuals I serve do not live on disability because the system is so difficult to navigate, and they don't know how to access the resources that they need. So as a parent of an adult that lives on the spectrum and has a mental illness, all the things that you're talking about. So he's been on private insurance up until he was 19 and a half years old when he was approved for services through the state. He aged out once he was in school to receive services outside. Unless we self-pay, insurance would no longer cover his OT or his speech therapy. So now it's covered in the school, which you said, they do a great job, they try to. But look at the number of children that an occupational or speech therapist in the school system has to see. Despite their heart or how well-trained they are, they have an overwhelming caseload of individuals. So, you know, understanding all of that and how you have to continue to push to educate yourself, learn to navigate the system. The majority of parents don't know the resources that are available to them. And many times as a parent, you've already mourned the fact that the child you thought you were going to have isn't going to be what you thought. It's almost like your child has died in some kind of way. And parents who have a child with a diagnosis, you can somewhat understand that. You probably experienced that, Dr. Johnson.
Absolutely, and that's exactly how we refer to it, is mourning the child that you thought you were going to raise and raising someone else. And it's interesting the responses we get when we give that diagnosis, because sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's happiness, that they have an explanation, and the resources, because realistically when we talk about resources, autism spectrum disorder is one of the most resource heavy disorders you can get diagnosed with, because there are things out there and available, and I think we're lucky in this area. We're seeing a growth in that area of service provision with a number of ABA providers coming into the fold in the past couple years. But absolutely, that mourning it's very real, and I've held entire groups based on that experience and the navigating the system, and it's difficult. It is it's really difficult, and having that support, finding that support like you were talking about, of just other people who are experiencing the same thing, was the parents really communicated a lot of happiness about having that support and how important it was to them.
I mean, you live in silence, almost like a prisoner sometime in your own home, and you don't want to share the reality of what's happening. You know, and I even see this from the parents of the adult members of Elevation House that I work with, that, you know, when they're experiencing mania, or they have a psychotic break, they keep all this inside. And so as a parent or a caregiver, you need that additional support because it's difficult.
And the groups that you're talking about, are those support groups, or tell us about the groups that you're talking about of parents that come together?
So I've only run one of these groups so far, and it was, I feel, a big success. They felt it was a big success. But we had about 6 or 7 parents of children who had been diagnosed. Most of them had been diagnosed recently. 1 or 2 of them had been in the diagnosis for a while. But it was kind of, we were looking at it a little bit as a therapy group, from one aspect where we talked about coping strategies and kind of for the parents themselves, and then also about strategies and helping with progress seen for their kids and navigating the system and what the diagnosis means, and just a whole lot of information that can kind of get lost otherwise. And they really enjoyed it. I think they wanted more of it than I could provide, but it was a really good experience, and I'm hoping to get some more of those together kind of as time goes on, because it was, like I said, a really good experience for everyone.
And Tripp, do you offer those through the North Georgia Autism Foundation, opportunities for families to come together and learn?
So now that Dr. Johnson is here, we refer families to him for those programs. We provide parent groups, which is different than a parent support group. We like to bring in professionals to provide information to parents. What we found when we were operating parent support groups was a dominant personality would take over the group and tend to focus on their own experience, and that didn't seem to be as beneficial as we present, information on developmental pediatrics or ABA or guardianship or IDEA, and have the actual people that provide those services come in and talk to the parents. But you need both, because there is mourning and there's a crisis. And I think something that Dr. Johnson said was adjusting expectations is really important, because a lot of parents are still focused on, my child's going to go to school and graduate and go on to college and be independent and have a happy life. And now it's derailed, but you can still bring them back to, what is success? Success is progress from where you are right now, okay? It's not fixing that dream back to being on track of what you thought it was going to be. And I think the sooner that they realize that progress is from where you are right now, and it can happen today, it may go 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but you're making progress today for your child. And that's the goal, not to fix the child so that they can go out and be what you thought they were going to be before you received the diagnosis or had a child. And I think that's the first step that Brian is providing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one other thing that we sometimes have to do is remind parents that what happiness for their children looks like is going to differ based on the child. Like, the children may be happy as they grow up doing a variety of things, and it doesn't have to necessarily be that dream of happiness that the parents had to begin with. Happiness can be a lot of things. So kind of reminding parents of that flexibility, that it's all right to be a little bit different. It doesn't matter that much.
Right.
You have to be very pliable. It's not for everybody. It's not for wimps. But you have to realign your entire thought about what life was going to look like, many times I still wonder at 20 years of age, will my son live on his own? He talks about it occasionally, will I be 80, 90, 100 years old still providing care for my son? Can I? Because there are many self-care things, although you probably would be in the same room with him, you all would know, but a lot of people wouldn't know that he lived with autism. But he needs a lot of care. And can I physically, for someone who's 6 foot, and I'm not, provide that kind of care for him as he grows older, and he has, some issues of his own, health-wise, mobility-wise, etc. And what does my retirement look like? Guardianship. I have to take his rights away as an adult to make decisions for his own life, and all of those things that come with it's so complex. Yeah. But it is a beautiful journey that I wouldn't not experience for anything in the world. My son loves people, and people love him. He never meets a stranger. And he's had wonderful people that have allowed him to experience a lot in his life, like playing football on the middle school team and them agreeing with the team to let him score a touchdown. He still talks about that to this day. To cheering his siblings on when they play in sporting events, to participating in challenger sports. Sports is a big thing in his life. So it's different, but it's still beautiful.
And for parents who may be watching and their child has been diagnosed with autism, what would you say to them about, from a parent's perspective of self-care, for example? Like, how do you take care of you in the middle of all of these challenges, because it seems like it's been a challenging road up to this point?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I have a supportive family and husband
and my husband and I take care of each other.
Yeah.
It's like tag team wrestling. Sometimes you have to get out of the ring, and you have to know when the other person needs to get out. My husband makes me do some things because I am a caregiver. Obviously, from what I do, I give care at work.
Yeah.
You know, constantly just being in there and being walking alongside of other people who are going through their own life challenges. So I carry that burden already. So we all constantly keep track of each other. I would say for me personally, my spiritual walk is extremely important. Believing that there's something greater than me that's in control has been very helpful. And being okay with not being okay and being transparent to say I'm not okay.
Right.
Because I'm going to tell you that has been the hardest challenge for me. Because I always try to want to keep it together with a perfect little bow. And life doesn't have perfect little bows. It's okay for them to be a little uneven or untied every now and again. It's okay.
And do you think that your journey with your child led you to the Elevation House? What was that journey like that got you to this place? And let's kind of change our conversation just a little bit about those services that you offer there.
Yeah. So that, my son's experience, but I also worked for the Floyd County Sheriff's Office. I was a sergeant in our professional development division, but before then I worked the jail. And our country's jails and prisons are our mental health institutions, and that absolutely should not be. There are people in our jails and prisons that don't deserve to be in our prisons. We have criminalized people living with mental illness, people living with autism, and something has to be done to change that. And if I could be a part of the solution from the things I experienced there, and then on a personal level, seeing family members struggle through mental illness, losing a friend who died by suicide, who I was on the phone with her. So personal things, and then seeing that at the sheriff's office made me realize something more has to happen. And the something more is not complicated. Elevation House uses a very simple yet effective model of mental health recovery. We are a mental health recovery center. Our model has been used for more than 70 years across the globe to literally transform lives. We are friends and colleagues that walk alongside of people in their journey to mental wellness to help them find and achieve a personally gratifying life for whatever that looks like to them, not their parents, but to them. What does that look like?
And how do you do that?
We provide wraparound supports. So we may connect with Dr. Johnson's, we may connect with Tripp, Ritchie. It is a community of people that it takes to rally around another person. Some very simple things that we do is helping them navigate the system. Some people need help applying for disability for the first time. They need supports being able to afford their medication, because most people living with serious mental illness are uninsured or underinsured, leaving them with such a disparity in health care that they die 25 years before their peers. That also should not be. So helping giving them the best chance that they might possibly be able to have to live a fulfilled life. They come daily and find meaningful work at what we do at Elevation House. So Elevation House's model is intentionally understaffed so that when people come, they can be involved in every facet of running the nonprofit, from running the kitchen to helping cook 2 meals a day for their peers, to running the nonprofit, helping us raise funds, doing our social media, doing graphic art, experiencing things that maybe they never have tried before, but no task is off limits. And then for those that want to go to work, helping them build the stamina to work through our daily program and the confidence. And I've seen people who literally, Chrissy, have never worked and never thought they could work, who live with schizophrenia or schizoaffective, things that people in our community are afraid of, who are working and thriving. I have a young lady, she's 55 years of age, who is living in a home for the first time ever in her life. And it took 1 year for us to help her find a place to live that she could afford. I have a gentleman who was on disability for 12 years and never thought he would work again in his life, and he is working in the career that he wants to work in. I have another young lady who lost her licensure to
to be a vet tech who has recaptured her licensure and is working as a vet tech, living a personally gratifying life. I'm going to weddings. We just live life with each other, and we don't do anything that's medical mental health. We refer people out for those resources, but we help them navigate life, basic living skills, and just be there as a support system.
And who's eligible for those services there at Elevation House?
So we do service the Northwest Georgia area. We have some virtual programs. Unfortunately, Medicaid or Medicare does not cover our services. We're specifically excluded from coverage, so they can't get transportation through those services to Elevation House. But if you can get there, we serve you. There are only 2 clubhouses in the state. Anyone who's 18 years of age or older who lives with a serious mental illness, so this is primarily the diagnoses of bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, major depressive disorder, or a combination of any mental illness that impacts your ability to successfully live and thrive in your daily life. Our services are completely free of charge. It costs about $2,500 a day to hospitalize someone for mental illness. It costs $7 a day for someone to live a personally gratifying life and participate in our programs. And so we're cost effective, and we are proving that people can be okay, and they can live a full life.
Well, thank you for that service that you provide to
Absolutely.
North and Northwest Georgia there through Elevation House. And we have about 9 minutes left in the show. We haven't even taken a commercial break. Sorry to the tech folks. They can figure that out later. As we round out our time together, Tripp, what have we missed today? What do we need to cover that people need to know? Because we just want to provide and let people know there are resources.
So a couple of things, I think. The prevalence of autism, right now on the CDC, it's 1 in 54. But I was part of an ATOM site where I worked before, and they are who provide the prevalence data to the CDC, and it's going to go to 1 in 44. And there's, presently with 1 in 54, adults with autism they're finding out that there's about 2% that were never diagnosed.
So the key is that early diagnosis.
Yes, and that of all of the people coming through the system, there's 70,000 kids every year that are 18, 19 years old, graduating, going through the services. So that's 700,000 new young adults that really don't have a place to go after they get through the school systems, if you will. And there's a cliff of services at 20 years old, 21 years old, that from a healthcare point of view, from a social services point of view, from an educational support point of view, there's nothing left for them. So what we did was we partnered with the University of Alabama, and Dr. Johnson's part of this. I'm a co-PI, a principal investigator for a study on transitions to improve services earlier in the school system to transition to an opportunity after you graduate. And we should hear by the end of this week on that grant. We're also potentially a co-PI on an NIH study that supports Dr. Susan White, who's the director of their Autism Center at the University of Alabama, for the STEPS program to involve 3 universities, University of Alabama, Vanderbilt, and the University of Pittsburgh. And we're going to be, the NIH asked for a sample study before they award it to those 3 schools. And we scored really well. That's a process for getting a grant, and it looks like we'll know in March whether we get that. So we have an opportunity to provide evidence-based services in Georgia next year that no one else in the country is receiving. And what this does is it trains psychologists like Dr. Johnson and Dr. Rocky to be able to provide these services through their practice after the study is completed. It takes 17 years when you have a peer-reviewed study that's accepted as a new modality from the time it's approved to get out into the field.
17 years.
17 years. So what we're going to do, hopefully, is provide that resource to Georgia as the first in the country through people like Dr. Johnson, clinicians like, and the school system. We have 2 school systems in Dalton, the Dalton area, that are leaning forward, as well as psychologists there. We have Fannin County school system that's leaning forward on that. Gilmer hasn't been really responsive to this. They've got a lot going on. But in North Georgia, we're going to have a resource that is going to improve transitions for our children, but for future generations as well, by creating a capability in the psychological community through psychologists that can be replicated in other parts of the state. I would be remiss to say that we're a 501c3 and that all of our services are completely free to everyone that we support. In fact, our only paid employees, our W-2 employees, are adults with developmental disabilities. A lot of people don't realize that we're run completely by volunteers. And this is a mission from our church. This is how it kind of started, going back to your earlier question, Epworth United Methodist Church. So a good number of our volunteers who run the Camp Epworth in the summer for younger children, the teen team program that we have, are from our church, and it's awkward for a Methodist because you're not supposed to talk about the good things that you're doing, but then no one finds out. So I'm kind of an outcast in my family. Most are Baptists, but the Methodists do good things too. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there. But science is the key to improving services for all of us, I think, whether it's on the mental health side or on the autism side.
And I'll make sure that as we close out this program on Facebook and also on our links to this program, I'll include all of your contact information, because we really haven't talked about that, but you're exactly right. It takes fundraising dollars to make these organizations work. It takes information and sharing of information. So I'll make sure that we share your phone numbers and your email addresses and your websites and any upcoming events, things like that, because I know for Elevation House, you've got some links of things that you have coming up. So we'll share that. So if you are led, especially at the end of the year with your charitable giving, North Georgia Autism Foundation, Elevation House, and for folks who want service there, tell me about your pay scale or your pay model there.
So we accept most major insurance providers, including Medicare and Medicaid.
Okay.
We also do accept private pay or personal pay or whatever you want to call it. And we do have a sliding fee scale that we can implement. And if you have concerns about developmental disabilities and maybe being developmentally delayed, come and talk to us and we'll figure something out.
Okay.
We'll get you where you need to be.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you all coming on the program today. As we mentioned earlier, I had a thought in my mind, and I should always just toss that out the door, do the pre-show talk, and then it all becomes something different. And what valuable information that you, Carrie, provided today, being vulnerable about your own family and your struggles, and hopefully if parents are watching and their child is maybe off in some of those milestones, that Tripp Ritchie now is a name that they know, or you, Dr. Johnson, there at Blue Ridge Psychological Services, that they can give you a call and help their child get on the right track. Well, thank you all again for being here today. And we thank you for watching this program. As we wrap up today, I do want to say thank you to all of the guests who've been on our program throughout this last 5 months on behalf of Fannin County Family Connection and all of those supporting organizations, including Blue Ridge Community Theater, Fannin County Division of Family and Children's Services, Fannin County Public Library, Highland Rivers Health, the North Georgia Autism Foundation, North Georgia Mountain Crisis Network, and the Craddock Center. On behalf of all of these organizations, we thank you for supporting this initiative. We thank ETC for giving us this platform. I thank Fannin County Family Connection for giving me the opportunity to host these programs, to share information. And as I mentioned earlier, this initiative will turn to a newspaper initiative in January. Throughout the entire year, during the last week of the month in the News Observer, which is submitted there or distributed there in Fannin County. They are giving space to this initiative. So many of organizations, including Tripp, including Dr. Rocky and Blue Ridge Psychological Services, they will be writing articles and submitting those to the paper. So this initiative does not conclude, even though our year concludes. And we thank you for watching this program today. Thank you for your time. Be well, and we'll see you in 2022. Thanks for watching.